says, Lord opened his eyes to help him see. And boom, he saw the things that are invisible. Well, Job doesn't know what's going on in this scene, but we're about to see it. And we're going to get to see a picture of the invisible. Job chapter 1, verse 6. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Doth Job fear God for naught? Hast not thou made a hedge about him and about his house and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. But put forth thine hand now and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy power. Only upon himself put not thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. So last week we took a look at Job. This week we're going to get to look at the enemy. We're going to look at the foe, at the one who stands against. And we're going to start. I got a bunch of stuff, so we're going to start. We're just going to try to go through them pretty quick because I want to throw them out there. But I'm going to tell you the stuff at the end. That's the stuff I want to get to. That's the stuff that makes me smile. First thing that we need to point out is I want you to notice Satan's location. You know, we tend to think, oh, he's going to be at the bar, he's at a movie theater. Of course, you know, Satan's going to be wrapped up in Hollywood. No, that's easy for us to think. I should have said politics, but that's not where Satan was. Satan is at a worship service. Satan's right here in a religious crowd. When you see the scene, it starts in verse 6. Here's that change. Here's that picture in the heavenly. Here's God. Here's the angels. And guess who shows up in this arena? Well, it's Satan who shows up. It's our adversary. And if you give it any thought, why do you think he came? This might be a worship service, but Justin, he didn't show up to worship. That's not why he's there. He's not there to fellowship with his brethren. Okay, that's not his purpose. He's not there for anything good. That's not who he is. You know, I read a couple books and I was flipping through them. Well, I can't say I read them. Ben, I flipped through them is more, because as soon as I got to this part, I'm like, don't like that one. Because they came to this picture, and Satan's there for warfare. But when you look at this picture, preacher, I want you to understand, here's the picture of his warfare. He shows up, he's standing in front of God, and he can do nothing. This is like the picture of World War II. Rommel goes to Patton. Excuse me, Mr. Patton, can we talk? Oh, I should have goose-stepped him in there. And he shows him, do you mind if I send my airplanes by and bomb your tanks and take out your fuel depot? Because Heather, he can do nothing. He's asking for permission for the attack. Because outside of permission, he's powerless. You know, a picture of war. This is the craziest warfare. We're going to see he is definitely our enemy, but hopefully by the time we're done this morning, we're going to see he's just a tool. You know, tools can't do anything unless they're in the hand. Satan might think he's mighty, but he's a tool just being used. Because he's powerless without God. So we get this picture of who he is, and why is he there? Well, we know a little bit about him. We know that his purpose is to fool, it's to beguile, it's to deceive, it's to deter. That's why he's called the angel of light. He shows up, he's trying to change our perception and get us to buy the counterfeit, get us to offer the counterfeit. And then that's the same thing he does in this worship service we're in this morning, and the same thing he's going to do in 1 in 40 minutes. That's who he is. And so he shows up, he's in this picture. God says to Satan, he says, where you been? What you been doing? Now this is like every time God asks a question, he knows the answer. He knows the answer. But Satan's honest. He says, I've been to and fro, up and down. Let me tell you, to Satan, if you break down these words and just do a really quick word study, you're going to find out he's basically saying this. I've been to this one and this one and this one and this one and this one. I've been one after another after another after another. He's not wasting any time. As quick as he can, he's going all over, up, down, sideways. He is trying not to miss anyone. Now here's where that makes me want to say, well, how fast can Satan run? I spent some time trying to figure that out, Justin. Because I don't want to make him have godly character traits. I don't want to make him everywhere. But I don't want to limit him too much. So exactly how fast can he run? You know, I can't find that out. But I did get this picture. So when you start looking at this, you end up in Matthew 4, the tempting of Christ. Christ out in the wilderness. You know what you don't see? You don't see anything where Christ says, and he saw Satan coming from afar off. It's boom, and he's there. And then you know what happens next? Boom, and they're at the temple. And then you know what happens next? It's boom, and he's on the mountain. I don't know how fast he is. But it doesn't seem like he has to walk like you and me. You know, if I was to guess, preacher, I love it when you talk about, you know, how he floats out of the tomb. Lazarus comes forth. I love that picture. Well, I've never had that picture, and maybe you've never had this one, but I think Satan's like Star Trek. He just beams around. Now, when you start thinking about that, the idea of to and fro, one after another, as many as I can get, constantly busy, that's my purpose, constantly focused, gets it a little bit scarier. Because, you know, I've spent my whole life saying, I'm not that important. Satan has bigger people to deal with than me. And he's got all these other angels. But really, but when you start looking at to and fro, up and down, everywhere I can get, we might be dealing with Satan a little bit more often than we think. So he paints this picture. He says, that's what I'm doing. That's where I've been at. And I do want to say this. I don't like looking at Satan. I don't know. Some people like to study it. I don't. I don't want to be ignorant, but I don't want to give him too much credit. And usually when you do, we start giving him too much credit. The bus broke down, Satan's in the engine. Or it's got 300,000 miles on it and we haven't changed the oil in 30,000 miles. So, you know, let's not take our responsibility and blame him. And so you know, I got to tell you, I tend not to be in that. Well, what was man's part in it? I tend to look for the responsibility and how you can make the change. But the other side is you can live too much in that area, Doug, and you can forget that Satan's a powerful enemy. And he is involved. And one of the things we're going to see in this book is Satan's interaction with God and Satan's interaction with man. And they both exist. And we got to be careful not to give him too much credit, but also not to be too dismissive. So we get that said, and we're getting this picture. And, you know, we know 1 Peter 5:8 tells us, you know, let's get a picture of him. This is who he is. Be sober, be vigilant, because we have an adversary. He's the devil, and he's like a roaring lion, and he walks about seeking whom he may devour. And this is who he is. And we get this picture. And I guess what I'm saying is we got to be careful not make sure he's not, you know, in our head like the little kitty cat. You know, I used to love to take the boys. In fact, Angie's got pictures of all the boys sitting by the glass with the lion behind them or with the tiger behind them. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was Josh. Back in the day, you could get like $50. You could get a family pass for the zoo for the entire year. But we didn't have a whole lot of money, so something for the entire year was great. And then you just go to the zoo. I let them run around, and I go into the air-conditioned place and watch the water cows, watch them feed them lettuce. And they used to always go to the lines. I could always find them there until one time they were there at feeding time. And feeding time, that lion roars, and that lion takes that leg of meat and devours it. And I'm pretty sure it was Josh. He didn't want to go see the lions anymore because they weren't just big kitty cats. And then we just got to realize we're not dealing with a big kitty cat. If we give him opportunity, he will rip us to shreds. He is vicious. He is called the adversary. So we get a picture of where he's at. And we get a picture of what his activity is, but I also want to get a picture of his philosophy, because this is where it starts to get in. Satan's philosophy. First, he's going to and fro. He's busy. He's restless. And that's the first thing we see about him. That is the spirit of our age. That is what we struggle with. The radio has to be on when you get in the car. The TV has to be on when you get home. And if you really want to be serious, anytime you're not tied up in those things, or sometimes even when those things are on, the radio's on, the TV's on, and we're still tied up in our phone. It's a game or social media or it's something. It's just let's occupy the brain so there's no quiet time. There's no time to settle down. I've just got to be busy. I've got to be occupied all the time. Well, I want to tell you, that's Satan's playground. You know, Luke chapter 10, Christ is with Mary and Martha, and Martha's run around busy trying to take care of all these things, and this is what she hears. Martha, Martha, thou art worried and cumbered and burdened down about many things, but one thing is most needful. And Mary has chosen it. And what that was not to run around and be busy, not to try to please yourself, not to consume life on gaining or getting or doing, because we're not supposed to consume the time of this life on our own lust. What was the most needful thing was to commune with God. And Satan keeps us so busy. That's just his spirit. That's just who he is. He's keeping us so busy that there's no time for communing. And if we're going to ask ourselves a question, the first question is really just how much communing are we doing? You know, it is November. I guarantee if we spend any time communing, we would be thankful. Because to even look at him changes the viewpoint of what we have and where we are and how we got it. It changes the viewpoint. So remember this, restlessness is a mark of the enemy. But then we start to see his philosophy a little bit in verse 11. He says, but put forth thine hand and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. That's just a lie. That's a straight up accusation. That's not true. And that's the second thing we get to see about Satan. He's just a liar. In fact, the New Testament tells us he's a father of lies. So if we're listening to lies, or if we're repeating lies, or if we're wrapped up in deception, know this, we're just living with Satan's youngins. That's the group we're running around with. And that's a scary thought. He's a roaring lion seeking who he may devour, and you're running around with his kids. That's not a very comfortable place to be. And we'll bring that back up here in a minute. Now, look at this accusation. God in verse, this is important too. Verse 8, and the Lord said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job? Just, you know, most of the time, this is how this book is pictured. Satan goes to God, and Satan says, God, you're protecting Job too much. What happens if you let him go? We missed this verse. That's not what happens. It's crucial for the whole book. You know who brings up Job's name? God does. God's the one who turned the spotlight on Job. I mean, I think this is the beginning of God's plan. What's God's plan? I don't know what God's plan is in any instant, but this one I get to see it. God shows his plan. He does everything for a reason. And for a reason, he says, let me put the spotlight on Job. Satan, oh yeah, I'm going to fool him. Nope. He starts out, have you considered Job? Well, glad you asked. Glad you asked, Lord, because, yes, I've considered him. And let me tell you, Job is just using you, God. He's taking advantage of you. See, you've got this hedge around him, which, by the way, God puts the spotlight on Job, and Satan points out to you and I that there's a hedge. Now, even though Satan's the one that's saying it, I'm sure glad he's right this time. There is a hedge. And so he says, he's using you for the hedge. See, you've given him protection, and you've given him provision, and that's why he just does this because he's getting something from you. You've made Job a city set on a hill, and I can't get to him. Matthew Henry tells us this hedge. When I was a kid, probably the first books I ever started reading were Handfuls of Purpose. My dad bought that little series first, and I thought it was like the coolest thing. It's like all these little snapshots inside preachers' heads. So, this is great. Then he got the Matthew commentary, and I was like, well, let me read that again. Let me read that again. Oh yeah, this is great too. And I don't know, for about 3 years, that's pretty much, what did Matthew Henry say about it? And it's just brilliant, man. But Matthew Henry says about this, the hedge is made up of two things. It's made up of grace and provision. Grace protects us spiritually. Spiritually, I'm I'm wrapped up in his grace, and I'm protected. Physically, I'm protected by his providence. This is not just a little bitty hedge. This is a really important hedge, and nothing can get through it. Nothing is greater than his grace spiritually, and nothing's going to overtake his providence physically. So quit worrying. But Satan's here. He says, I've come from the north side, to and fro, east and west. I've been everywhere. I've come from the north side, can't get in. I've gone over to the east side, I can't get in. I guess that means you have to go to the south side, can't get in. I've gone to the west side, I can't get in. Well, Doug, I'm going to tell you, we're going to take a look at how powerful he is. But let me tell you, there's a hedge around us. We ought to be able to put our head on the pillow. Because he can't get in. Yes, I've considered Job. Yes, I know exactly who he is. He's the greatest man in the East. But I can't get to him. Now, if you'll take away that protection, and if you'll take away that provision, he'll curse you. Because he's selfish. Because here's where we get Satan's pitch. Man, any man, is only into his life for what he can get. You're helping him and you're blessing him too much. Notice that Satan knew that he was getting help and he was getting blessed. Sometimes we don't know that, but Satan knows where it's coming from. You're helping him too much. Satan's whole philosophy here is this claim that man is self-serving. The fundamental law of man is all he ever cares about is self. Now you oppose that to, what's the greatest commandment? Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy mind, with all thy soul. And the second is like unto the first, love thy neighbor. You see the drastic difference? Take care of self. What about me? What's in it for me? Well, that's what Satan says. That's man's every question. What's in it for me? You take away the benefit for me. If any man ever has to choose between what's best for them, what's easiest for them, who's going to take care of them, or caring about someone else, or falling into and being submissive to God's will, they will choose self every time, Lord. Let me prove it to you. Let me show you. Now we're going to take a look at that in a minute, but I want to jump right in here. Preacher, I'm waiting for Wednesday, for the next Wednesday when we go through God's promises. That's everybody has their favorite. That's my favorite. Now I know just about every time you're going to do that, you're going to say this promise is. This is a provisional promise. You know, it's linked somewhere. Now, I'm not going to say this hedge is provisional because, I'm just not that bold. But I am going to say this. I'm going to say we can open the back door. I'm going to say God wants to put the hedge around us, and we leave the door unlocked. We even leave the light on and say, here's the door. Ephesians 4, we're just going to go one spot because it kind of ties to this philosophy, his attack right here. Ephesians 4, verse 26 and 27. Well, we know what it says. It says, be ye angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath. Because when we do, we give place to the devil. I want you to think about that. Ben, God wants to put a hedge around you, a provisional hedge, a protecting hedge. Not just you, but you and all you have and your family. That's what he said. That's what Satan said. You've done for him all that he has and his family. God wants to do that just for you. But we can go, here you go. Come on in, kitty cat. Got cat food for you. Named Jonathan and Eric and Joshua and Angela. Come on in. Because I want to focus on me. You know, that's where we get angry most of the time. Oh, selfish indignation, righteous indignation. I'm just mad over evil. No, you're mad because somebody didn't treat you the way you thought you should be treated. And when you do, you're opening the door. After all I've done, my wife, my kids, my boss. Preacher, 20 years and you still don't. To put a hedge, but we don't want to stay in it. No, we can look at Satan's power. verses 13 through 22. It's hard for me to try to cover this many verses. And there was a day when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. Now realize what we have is this picture in the invisible. Satan just left. Okay, I got my hall pass. I can do it. I have permission slip. And he's gone, now seen back to earth. And there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And there came a messenger unto Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the asses feeding beside them, and the Sabeans fell upon them and took away, yea, all, and have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, the fire of God is fallen from heaven, and hath burned up the sheep and the servants, and consumed them, and I only am escaped to tell thee. And while he was yet speaking, clump, 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 there's another one coming right behind him. He didn't even get to catch his breath. And while he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, the Chaldeans made out 3 bands and fell upon the camels and have carried them away, yea, and slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, thy sons and thy daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness and smote the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young men, and they are dead. And I only am escaped alone to tell thee. Then Job arose, rent his mantle, shaved his head, and fell down upon the ground and worshipped, and said, naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly, which is a miracle of God. But I want to see first, I want to see Satan's power. This enemy that I don't want to give too much credit to, because this war is, Mr. Patton, can I attack your tanks? Yes or no? You know what? If he says yes, he's not leaving me alone. And if he says no, I'm inside the hedge. Bomb away. You can't. He said no. Satan's power. Doug, just look how quickly this happens. Now, you can try to convince me this. I'm nodding my head because it's not worth fighting over, but I'm going to tell you it's a waste of breath. I'm not going to believe you. So you can say, well, Brother Jeremy, see, the Sabeans were sitting right there, and they've been planning this for years, how they were going to attack Job. And it's just coincidental that the Chaldeans over here, they've been planning this for years too, and they just decided at the same time that they were going to go and attack. But I don't believe that. I believe what this shows is how great the influence of Satan is. He left, and it didn't take any time for him to convince the world to turn and attack. I spent some time this week watching the news, which I try not to do too much. Justin, this is what I just want to go find a wall and beat my head against the wall. How can you say? I mean, how can a mayor say what he said about the trial? And how can Hollywood and how can some of these things be just? How does it make sense to them? I want to say it doesn't make sense to them. They're just, but I honestly believe it makes sense to them because they're deceived, and that's the power of his deception. There's going to be a rapture someday. And they're going to believe whatever they believe, 1/3 of the world or however many, gone. And it won't be any problem for them to believe something. Satan's power of deception is amazing. And we better not open the door because we'll be just as deceived. Comes as an angel of light in the worship service. That's where he does his business. He is so deceptive. Verse 16, not paying attention. It says he calls down fire from heaven. Well, no, I don't know. Well, you can, again, Doug, you can say whatever you want to. I'll just nod my head. But, well, actually, I could go to Revelations, where the Antichrist is going to call down fire from heaven. Good. We got a pretty powerful foe. the kids were all eaten. And probably a tornado, hurricane, whatever. We don't even have to name it. A great wind comes, collapses the house. It all falls down. In control. Eric, are you up there? Did I give you Hebrews 2? Oh. But this is scary. For as much then as the children are partakers of flesh and blood, he also himself likewise took part of the same, that through death he might destroy him that had the power of death, that is the devil. He has the power of death. Sometimes I think we don't get this. We don't get this fall stuff. The fall. Genesis 3, the fall. Well, we don't get it because we don't get this idea that man had dominion over the earth. Dominion. That makes us ruler. And we forfeited it and said, we don't want it. Here, Satan, you can have it. And that's why he's called the prince of the power of the air. We don't understand. No man has an idea what it meant to have dominion over the creation. I know this sounds crazy. But who says we didn't control the wind and the waves and He gave us rulers, control. Man's destroying the planet. Yep, since Genesis chapter 3. We have a powerful enemy. We get this picture. Oh, here you go. We have a powerful enemy. Brother Hank, you still want to leave the door open? Want to open it up? You think, okay, I'm a big boy, I can handle it? We won't have time, but look how fast he reacted. Permission slip, boom, all of it at one time with as much wrath and anger and attack as he could. Boom. He didn't even get to catch his breath, and another one's coming, and another one's coming, and another one's coming. There's no time to change, get up, close the door, change your mind. But keep on that topic. As long as we're in the New Testament, stay in the New Testament. I don't think I gave you these verses, but you can go to Mark or we could go to Luke. I love these verses. You know, where the disciples were out on the lake and the wind and the waves and the boat's already full of water. You know what he says? It says that he rebukes the wind and the waves. Now, I don't think he's talking to wind, and I don't think he's talking to waves. I think he's talking to the power behind the winds and the waves. And when he rebukes them, they stop. Satan might be the prince, but he does not get to control his own day. He's not in charge of himself. We have a mighty enemy. He's powerful. He's scary. Preacher, he's even mighty. We have a mighty foe. But he's not almighty. Justin, I know this. One almighty beats all the mighty. And we serve the Almighty. Job served the Almighty. Satan is not his own boss. He doesn't get to do whatever he wants. Sometimes we never get past this idea of the devil. Oh, the devil's doing this in my life, and the devil's doing that. We need to spend a little time to lift our eyes up. Because we have one in heaven who is more powerful than the devil. Spend more time looking up there. Notice in this passage, God sets the rules. In this passage and the next passage. This passage, do what you want to all that he hath, but don't touch him. Satan doesn't even try to touch him. He has to go back and ask again. The rebel does not rebel against the rules. He doesn't even think about it. He can't. Nothing he can do. You know what Job did? You know, we get to the end of this book. In all this, Job sinned not. Want to know why? Because in verse 5, you know what Job was doing? Getting up early, seeking the Lord, paying the cost continually. You know what life was to him? Life was to him up here. He wasn't opening the door with anger. Satan said, I can't get him. You put him up on a hill, I can't get there. Yeah, I'm going to do this. When you start talking about this stuff, this is where we start to get in trouble. Justin, this is where you get in trouble if you're having this conversation with the world out there. Because you know what I just said? I said God's in control. That's what I said. You know what I believe? God's in control. Okay, then why does evil happen? Why did God allow World War II? Why did God allow World War I? I don't know why God allowed things. Okay, but just a little thing, because this is what I was when I was looking through there. Why does God allow the righteous to suffer? I just Googled it. And this is what I found. C.S. Lewis in the book Problem of Pain says that's the wrong question. It's not why does he allow the righteous to suffer. It's why not. Because the righteous are the only one who are equipped to handle it. So why shouldn't they be the ones who suffer? Why shouldn't they be the example? He says it's the wrong question. And then, preacher, I started thinking about C.S. Lewis. You know, C.S. Lewis, who lost his mother before World War I, whose dad sent him away to a reform school that he said that he later calls hell on earth, who then went into World War I, saw World War I and all the destruction. Let me tell you, World War I, they were fighting right here. World War I, you saw somebody shoulder and cut and bleed, and you know, it wasn't fighting from 100 yards away. 100 yards away, they dug a hole, and then they got up in the morning and they ran at each other and they fought face to face. He saw all that ugliness. He watched his friends die, and that formed who he was. And he began this study of pain and anguish. And then World War II happened, Doug, and he became the voice of the BBC. He became the voice of Britain. He was the one who stood there and called them out to believe in God, called them out to trust him, explained and tried to get them to challenge their little manly views on why things were happening and why they should be happening and what should happen here, there. I don't know why all those things happened, but I do know this. Those things created a C.S. Lewis who spoke to all of England during World War II, and you try to tell me how many people are in heaven because of that. I don't know. It's 100 years after World War I. People are still quoting C.S. Lewis. The effect he had. This is England, you know, the Spurgeon's England, which had become so dark by World War II that the churches were empty, which, by the way, they are again now. Who knows, it might be time for a good war. I don't know why these things happen, but I know this. I know God has a plan. I know Satan can't defeat his plan. In fact, in this picture, Satan is part of the plan. He uses Satan to deal with pride that's inside Job that not even Job knew about. And in the end, after he goes through the ringer, Job says, I'm better off. I used to, but now I see you. And all this time, Satan thought he was accomplishing something. We have a powerful God. And where we need to spend our time is not running about worried out here. It's controlling the things we can. Then what we need to do is we need to rise up early. You know, I'm going to tell you, you're going to say, well, I'm not afraid of Satan. Well, I'm going to tell you, you're foolish. Okay, I'm afraid. But you know where I'm not afraid? When I step inside the hedge. It's like, there's the guy with the biggest gun in the whole wide world, but here is an impenetrable wall. So I'm going to go inside the impenetrable wall. You shoot all you want to. Nothing's coming through here. Inside that wall, I feel comfortable. So our response should be to rise up early in the morning, to offer sacrifices, and to do it continually. Because inside that hedge, nothing can come to us. And that hedge, I guess I will say, it's kind of provisional. We need to understand we have an enemy and do everything we can to put ourselves right in the center of where God wants us. Because it's not really that challenging. What does he want me to do? Well, he wants me to love and not be selfish, and he wants me to read, and he wants me to study, and he wants me. It's not that tough. We just have to make the things that matter important in our life. And he'll do the rest. He'll lead us through the rest. Justin, close in a word of prayer.